evening. I am so delighted to be here this evening. If at some time you cannot hear me, please raise your hands. There are a lot of older people here, including me, and so I don't hear well at all being a musician. That ended long ago. My hearing was gone at age 40. So if there are any of you who can't hear me, please, I'll speak up more. If you like being a Sherlock Holmes, this is the right place to be this evening. Because pulling back the curtain and finding out who done it is exactly what we're going to be doing tonight. Here's a question. How can America have the best education system in the world and then end up with it in a trash heap after spending billions of dollars? Today, 1 out of every 7 adults in the United States is functionally illiterate. The average reading level is at the 7th grade level. Sunday school is an American colonial tradition. Did you know that this is where Sunday school classes started, was in this country? Well, what did they do in those classes? The little children learned to read. What were they reading? Do you know what they were reading? The Bible. How many of our 6-year-olds can read the Bible today? For years, we've been focusing on high-stakes testing and accountability. We blather on about how critical 21st century learning and skills are for our survival in the 21st century global world. Bureaucrats absolutely swear on their mother's Bible that they will do a better job and give us smarter kids if we'll just give them a few billion more. Yet last week I heard Steve Forbes over at SMU put it in great perspective. He said, if we talk to a surgeon and he says, well, if you just give me some more money, I'll make sure the patient lives. Once they get lost, I go find another surgeon. Yet in business, cell phones and computers are increasingly superior products, and the costs just keep going down. However, there's an inverse position in education. The costs keep going up, and the product quality keeps going down. Dr. Patrick Deheen, who's a renowned professor, if you've never read any of his works, he is absolutely, you won't go to bed until you read everything that he's written. He's a political theorist at Notre Dame. He stated it well in a recent commentary, res idiotica, idiots. Most of today's youth are just what generations of parents taught their children to be: polite, respectful, well-behaved, and tolerant. There's just one problem with them. They don't know what liberty costs. They can't identify between good and right. They have no sense of what exceptionalism is. They don't even know how history got us where we are today and why its bloody path was actually worth it. But this is no fault of their own, he contends. They're absolutely trained to not care. They have learned exactly what we've asked of them, to be like mayflies alive by happenstance in a fleeting present. Our students' ignorance is not a failing of the educational system. It is its crowning achievement. Efforts by several generations of philosophers and reformers and public policy experts, whom our students and most of us know nothing, have combined to produce a generation of know-nothings. In other words, our educational system has deliberately and with malice aforethought undertaken to produce cultural amnesia. Is this an accident? Dr. Deheen says no, it's not an accident. It's a deliberate effort to sand off remnants of any cultural or historical specificity and identity. It is the consequence of a civilizational commitment to civilizational suicide. So you see, Common Core and nationalized education are really not the problem. They're really a symptom of something much greater. The problem is, for 100 years almost, America has been in a war. It's a silent psychological war that has targeted our children in the classroom. The war is being waged by the United Nations, by a few very wealthy American families and their foundations, and public-private partnerships with the U.S. government. The real problem is that education is being globalized for the purpose of training, not educating, but training. Remember that humans can be educated and animals are trained. Training people to live under socialism and a Soviet-style workforce. American public education continues to use the model of John Dewey. Now, I know some of you know who John Dewey is. If you look on some of the ISD websites, you will see they talk all about John Dewey and how proud they are to be going along with John Dewey's theory. When you see that, you know you've got a problem. Education, according to John Dewey, is not about making our schools better, but using the schools for political change and social change. And until we change what we're teaching our children and how we're teaching our children, education is not going to get better. Translated, they're going to get dumber. And it's going to cost a few more $1 billion than we even think we're going to put out. It's going to be a fortune, and we're going to lose our country in the process. Now let's pull the curtains back and let's see who are the people who are behind all of this. I love finding out, naming names, and being a sleuth. I think being a Sherlock Holmes, a female Sherlock Holmes, would maybe what I want to do in my next lifetime. Let's look at the role of the United Nations. Back in the 1850s, people, especially people from the British Empire, were wanting to have a socialist government, a world government. Cecil Rhodes established the Rhodes Scholarship Fund. You've all heard of the Rhodes, that fund, and scholars are sent over to Oxford, and they're sent there to be indoctrinated in socialism and world government. And if you will go on the internet, you can Google the names. Bring it up a little bit. Bring it up. Okay. You can find the names of people who have who have been awarded the Rhodes Scholarships. Most of them you will find are left-wingers, and you will see some of them here, like David Coleman, Rachel Maddow. Rachel Maddow was a Rhodes Scholar. And then Susan Rice, General Wesley Clark, and of course we know the others here. And then in 1945, all of this began to come together in the founding of the United Nations. And it was founded, you may or may not know this, by communist spy Alger Hiss. And he was also assisted by our U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So when you hear about the Chamber of Commerce, just know that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is very left-wing. The UN Charter promotes world government that reflects Soviet global ambitions. And for a long time, communist leaders were the ones who held the military posts in the UN. And today, the countries that are in the UN are mainly communist, socialist, Islamic, and military dictatorships, which you say, what in the world are we doing there? Why are we supporting more than 150 countries around the world? Well, because they thought it was so important, the UN established UNESCO, which is its education arm, because they wanted immediately to start getting people into this hodgepodge of changing their thinking so that they would begin over time to accept a one world government. Now, feisty Americans were not going to do this. We fight like Indians. We learned that, you know, and that's why the British couldn't beat us, because we fought like Indians, hiding behind things instead of lining up out there like the redcoats. Nevertheless, we were not going to be taken down in a violent revolution, but they could take us down over time. And you hear about the frog being boiled. Now, in 1948, there was established the second organization, and it's the self-appointed Chief of World Health Policies. Remember this World Health Policies. And by the way, there's a word here that I took and I didn't mean to. It's mental health policy, so be sure that you remember that. It's in my script, but it's not here. Mental health policies. It advises nations on the change and monitoring of attitudes and how people think. Now, let's look at how the UN forces change in citizens. They're using progressive teaching to do it. There is a flyer that's on their seat, and it's a chart there, and it talks about traditional learning and progressive learning. When they began to say, we're going to have to make some changes here, they took this country, began to take us away from liberal or classical education to progressive education. And there are several methodologies that they use, and they're very, very effective in changing minds and thinking. So this is how the UN monitors. And here's some things that they do in the school. And on here here, I have put some of the names of the things that you see that you hear about the children, like collaborative learning, project-based learning, and so forth. Well, the way that they're monitoring is through project-based learning, collaborative learning, and personalized learning. I'm not going into those here, but suffice it to say that personalized learning is not really customized learning. What it really means is the child is put in front of a computer. There's a very sophisticated software in that computer. And that computer is kind of like bumper cars, you know, that you go to the, and you see, so the bumper car will bump up against something and it's in the way, so it backs up and it goes in another direction. It keeps on until it can get its way through. This is what this computer will do, and it's a CAT. There's computer adaptive testing. They do the same kind of thing, and you can go in there, they can make global changes. For those of you in here who are computer gurus, you know what I'm talking about, that software can be done in a global change behind the scene. Moms can say, hey, this looks okay, snap, that line will be changed out there. Now, let's look at the 1960s. World Core Curriculum was set up by Dr. Robert Muller, promoting collectivist thinking, 1963. We have all of these. There were actually 45 communist goals for ways to take down America. I pulled the ones out that more specifically talked about education, and you can see what they are here, but you will see the first thing is getting control of schools and dumbing down the curriculum. We know they've already done that. Presenting homosexuality as normal. We know that that's been done, and the way it's being done, they actually have sexuality standards that are based around Common Core. And they're being used in the classrooms around, and they don't have the name Common Core on there, but if you look at them, it's teaching children about sex, a different alternate sex besides just, why are they talking to a 6-year-old about sex anyhow? But anyhow, the whole thing is to desensitize the child, and they're doing this also in literature. They're using pornographic literature, and you know, some kids, I mean, gee, when I was that age, you were scared to death to talk to a boy, much less read pornographic literature in the classroom. Then along comes another UN entity. This one was actually funded initially by UNESCO, and this is the International Baccalaureate or IB program. I will tell you this, it's expensive. You know, we say this is really great that we've got it. Believe me, we're paying dear for it. It's actually cheaper to have AP, and we have better coursework under AP courses. Now, under this one, the goal is to teach students that they are citizens of the world, and they're told that God doesn't give us rights, the government gives us rights. They also learn about social justice, blah, blah, blah. It's a UN curriculum, and as I said, we pay dear for it. Then in 2015, this was last year, UNESCO had a meeting, and they're getting ready to do things with the UN. They're really getting ready to do more outreach with international education. But if you will look at what they have said here, we need to develop new values and behaviors. This is the importance of education for global citizenship. Now let's see what the role of the U.S. government is in here. Now this is really going to it's just chilling. It makes you so angry to know what we think we have the right we have the voting power to change this. We don't. This is not being decided with our votes whatsoever. And it's so behind the scenes and with all these other people that we only know their names and we just assume these are do-gooders out there. So let's start with 1965, the ESEA, the Elementary and Secondary Act of Education. Even at that time, there were a number of the GOP who said we should not be doing this because this is the nose of the camel in the tent. And they said at some point we're going to have the government in the tent totally. We do that today, so we have actually gotten there. As I said, here's the Trojan horse. At this time in the 60s, these psychologists who had started back in the 30s and 40s were actually successful. They started switching the American classroom from an academic teaching into behavioral changing, behavioral modification. And it's psychological manipulation. And they do it very, very subtly. You probably won't know it unless I gave you a textbook and I said, read this sentence and then read this one over here and to see if you see any difference and tell me what you think this says. It's so subtle up on the front end, you won't know that. And what it's doing is changing the thinking of those children. It's changing their worldviews. It's changing their attitude about traditional marriage and about Christianity. Now, here's the interesting thing. Since this time, we've been giving our money to D.C., and we're so thrilled when we get this money back. Free money. Free money. Why did we give it to them in the first place? Except there's one problem with free money. It does have a lot of strings. Now, in here we have 1979, we have the US DOE. This is, of course, a payback with Carter. And then in the 80s, we're really beginning to get into standardized testing. It's been around all the way back to World War II, but used by the military. But now they're wanting to do it in the schools. For one thing, the government, when it has standardized testing and putting some controls on it, is able to start taking control away from the states, taking away our 10th Amendment rights. They can also start to control people. Now in 1985, we have the U.S.-Soviet education systems that are being merged. And I will tell you this. For those of us who are Reagan conservatives, we cannot blame Reagan for this. He and Gorbachev did this together, but you know there was no way that it was really understood by Americans that the reason this was going on was to start indoctrinating American students into this Soviet world. Because what they're saying is, hey, we need to just combine, you know, everything in science and technology. So this is what we did. And then 1992, this was a Dear Hillary letter. How many of you have ever heard the Dear Hillary letter? Okay, I have some educating to do then. This is really, we can't go into it right now, but it's a fascinating letter. It was 18 pages. It's based on a German model for education. And Mark Tucker, by the way, who is still alive and still a close friend of Hillary Clinton, was telling her, this is what we need to do to change American education and to change the American paradigm. And he laid it all out. It's really amazing what he did. He remolded the entire American system from cradle to grave, and I know you're hearing that term now, aren't you? It's gotten to be a big buzzword, but it's been around. It's just, it's beginning to be, everybody has these buzzwords, and it's going to be the same system for everybody except the elite. They don't have to do this. They get to go to academic schools and academies. The labor market boards are going to be coordinated. This means they're simply going to say, this is what you're going to learn, this is where you're going to work, and if this job plays out, you've heard of this, you know, lifetime learning. This is what they mean. When this job plays out, you're going to be learning again. Now, when you learn the classical learning, there's a transference of skills. I learned that. And I cannot tell you how many things I can do today because I had a good classical learning with Latin and foreign languages and all these other things. I can even do some computer work today. But it's amazing how this transfers over, but not if you're doing just the workforce studying. And they even will do curriculum planning, as I said. Now, in 1994, Clinton signs in 3 laws that implement Tucker's plan, goes to 1,000 schools to work, and then he's reauthorizing the ESEA. And by the way, they adopted the UNESCO goals for world education in the 1990s. We have these Clinton laws. Now, the effect of them are long range, because what they're doing is it's setting up the mechanisms then that restructured all of American education, public education. They were setting up data mining. How many of you have been hearing about data mining? Okay, I left you another flyer about nosy data mining. There are some things, because I couldn't talk about it tonight, so I left you 5 flyers for you to do some reading at home. And we're going to be passing around the sign-up sheet for any of you that would like for it to be put on my newsletter. Now, believe me, you won't even get it every week because people get upset because I don't send something out every week. I promise to try to do better. But if you want something in specific, let me know, and you can also go to my website. The website is on some of that material that I left you. So anyhow, data mining is being done, and it's being done through all the testing. It's being done through these nosy surveys, and it's being kept permanently on these children's records that will go with them, just the way they did in China, for the rest of their lives. And they won't know what's on there, and there's no way they're going to take it off. 2001, we had No Child Left Behind. This now begins to be national accountability to control the content of what teachers are teaching. The Fed set up a benchmark, and it said the states have to meet that benchmark, or guess what? You're going to lose funding. What do you mean lose funding? It's our money just keep it here. And if we fail to meet those benchmarks, there are all kinds of penalties. Now, one of the problems they said was by 2014, we had, 100% of the students had to test proficient. Tyson, do you think 100% of the kids could test proficient in English? How many of your parents do all your kids match up? Do all of your grandchildren match up? They don't do 100% of anything. There's no way. I mean, it had to be politicians doing this to think that they could possibly get us to be on track across the United States. What happens by 2010? All the schools are starting to fail. One after the other, they're just failing. What does it take to fail? You have to fail to meet federal accountability standards. I didn't say curriculum standards, did I? Like Texas curriculum standards? That's not the point. You had to fail to meet federal accountability standards. And what were those? Well, not 95% of your kids took the test, and fewer than 90% showed up for class, and then, okay, so you didn't meet the graduation cutoff either, and also your subgroups didn't come up to par, so, you know, the school's going to fail this year. And so what happens when along comes, just recently, this last year, they were looking over what we call the nation's report card, and wow, they're saying, these kids have really gone down. Well, what did you expect? What had happened is because these kids were not passing these tests, they were dumbing down the test so they could meet this cutoff of the test. So they were dumbing down the test, dumbing down the content. So now the kids are dumber than ever, even than what the communists thought we were going to be, I suppose. So in 2004, Bill Gates, you can see his name. You may not see it up here. Just know that he's always behind the scenes. When you see tech, think Bill Gates. He, along with Microsoft, signs a UNESCO agreement. What do they want to do? This is how they're going to fast forward international education. They're going to do it through technology. Oh, and by the way, along the way, he's going to make a few billion. I read the other day, and I put a pencil to it, and he, on some of this testing, is making over $300 million. So you say, no wonder they really want these kids to take this test. There's somebody out there making something on it. 2009, we have Common Core. Also 2009, we have Race to the Top. 2009, we have an example of progressive learning here. Right here in Highland Park, so I thought maybe if I use this one, you could recognize it. If you go to the website and you kind of Google around in there, it says Global Connections Department. And when you see that, you will find out that it aligns the Highland Park curriculum with UNESCO's standards and methodology. And what is UNESCO tied into? The United Nations. So you can see where this is, and I'll bet you that a lot of people there don't have any idea about this. It just sounds, you know, when people say UNESCO, this is UN, it sounds, you know, like it's really a great thing. Then in 2015, this past fall, there was a bond issue that was passed in Highland Park, and I remember sitting in a meeting one day, I think it was our Park Cities meeting that we had, and they were explaining this to us, and I remember seeing up there, and it said that they wanted the schools reconfigured to new schools because they needed to have more space for group learning. Well, group learning, if you will look at that chart that I gave you, group learning is collectivism that they're teaching the students in that method of thinking. And this collaborative learning, they call it, is still collectivism. You can call it cooperative learning, project-based education, whatever you want to call it. And then 2015, this in December, we also passed ESSA. This is the Every Child Succeeds Act. And this got rid of No Child Left Behind. It was a reauthorization. I shouldn't say got rid of it. It's a reauthorization of ESEA, or No Child Left Behind. And then, right now, in D.C., as we speak, there's something very, very troubling that's going on. And this is etc. Congress is wanting to expand the power of the government to psychologically profile our children. This is Hitler stuff. This is SEL. So what is SEL? SEL is social and emotional learning, and we'll come back to that name in a minute. And by the way, what is CETRA? The name of it is Strengthening Education Through Research Act. That's the acronym. and it's going to be empowering the feds to expand the psychological profiling of our child. They're going to be analyzing the child's psychological makeup and collecting data that goes with him forever. Now, the SEL, social and emotional learning, is the latest buzzword in education. Now, for those of you who've ever been teachers, you know we have all these buzzwords that go around. And as soon as the conservatives figure out what those buzzwords are, they just change those buzzwords out there. So now we have, this is a new word, and I'll tell you what it replaced, but I'm not going to tell you yet. I want you to sit there on the edge of your seats. Academic knowledge is now passé. Why should your kid learn facts? You know all those little cards we used to hold up, 2 plus 2, you know, 4 minus 2, you know, these little cards we got out of our dad's shirts and so forth. Well, you don't need those anymore. Your child doesn't even need to learn facts. After all, he's got a computer. Just look it up in the computer. That's all you need to do. So, what is he going to do? Let's get him really brought up to par on this non-cognitive skills. It's called affective skills. And it's forcing change in thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and behaviors. And the data quality control, I went on their website this morning, and this is interesting what they say. They say that they see immense value in the ability to link data across early childhood education, across K through 12, post-secondary. They're going to link all this together with the workforce systems. Wow, this is chilling. Then let's see what the billionaires are doing behind the scenes. These are all good old buds together, by the way. And these, in the 20th century, these people together made $550 billion in today's dollar. And the names you'll know, J.D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Carnegie Mellon, Vanderbilt, Peabody, Ford, Guggenheim. These were all the titans of industry, and they were at the top. Well, guess what they did? Once some of these people really started from nothing. When they got to the top, they pulled the ladder up. They said nobody else was going to get there. They were there, and they did not want the middle class coming up, and they were going to do something to keep them from coming to power, and guess how they were going to do that? They were going to control education. Rockefeller and Carnegie schemed together. Rockefeller's going to take the national endeavor, Carnegie is going to go for the international, and all of them together are going to change today, change into what we are using today for our current public education. Now, I found something on the website. I think it would be really fun to be a Sherlock Holmes. These things are hidden back there in dusty bins, but they're really out there if you just start Googling. In 1934, the Carnegie Foundation funded a study, and it's 179 pages long on my computer. And the last chapter, and by the way, what they wanted to do with it was to find out how to change America from a free economic system into a socialism system. They made their money through capitalism, but they don't want anybody else to have that. So that's how they're going to change it. And how are they going to change it? They were going to have the schools use social sciences to change it. Isn't that what they're doing today, is changing history, changing civics? So they're already doing that. And then the Carnegie Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation did an 8-year study on the outcomes-based education. What that really is, it's really saying that you start at the end and you work backwards. And this is not how our children learn in America. We say, do the best you can and make what you can of yourself, but no, they want to decide out there what they want that child to believe, and they're going to work backwards. Now, let's look at 21st century, the feds and billionaires. They're taking over school choice. Now, I don't understand why the federal government thinks you know, they already have federal schools, our public schools, they've taken them over. But now they're so excited about school choice. Why are they excited about school choice? Anytime I see the government excited about something, red flags go up in my brain. And what are they excited about? Charter schools. Now, why is the federal government so excited about charter schools? Well, just very briefly, and there's an article there on your seat that is called Follow the Money. And it tells all about this that I'm not going to really have time to go through. But what they were doing is the charter school has state money. It does not have any local money because it's not using local taxes, and it doesn't have local leadership. I mean, you know, local boards. But it does have somebody who runs it like a charter operator, and They're the ones who put money into it, and they'll get the money wherever they can. And now, in this case, they were getting the money from hedge funds. So who are these people behind it all? When you see here, Joanne Weiss was one of them. She was race to the top person. She worked with Broad, Walton, Pearson, Gates, and so forth. And then you go on and you look at who Eli Broad was. He paid more than $500,000 for that Waiting for Superman. It's all about charters. Why does he like it so much? Because what they're going to do is the money that's going in there won't be the local money, it's going to be hedge fund money. So they're going to be the ones that are going to be controlling it. Well, guess what? Because these hedge fund guys were all tied to the federal government, do you see the connections of how they're going in there? Now, let me make sure you understand. I am not against charter schools. I'm trying to show you what concerns me. They're taking something that is working well. We have some very good charters. And I have told people the one thing that I'm concerned about charters is the federal government sticking its nose in there. If we could just keep them out, but my concern is this. They put their noses in now. Before long, it's going to be just another public school, except there will be no local representation. It will just be the feds altogether. And then we know that and by the way, all this money that was awarded to these buds, they have no idea where the money went. No paper trail whatsoever. That's in the article that I wrote, though. The education industry is second, only behind the healthcare industry. Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News and News Corporation, said the industry for education K through 12 is worth more than $500 million. And guess where he knows that's going? Is to the tech industry and to publishing industry. And then we have 21st century learning. And basically what that is all these texts together saying you cannot possibly survive in this new world unless you use technology. Get rid of the old, bring in the new, get rid of the teachers, bring in this technology. Why? Because they cannot afford the teachers and the textbooks, because all of this technology, there's a huge outlay for setting it up. And a huge outlay to keep it going and to keep it updated and just keeping it from crashing and having people there. And there's one thing they keep talking about, though, is 21st century is critical learning. Critical thinking, I'm sorry. Come on, give me a break. We do this in classical learning. Except the difference in classical learning is we have critical thinking and critical questioning, but not in 21st century learning. They get rid of the critical questioning. Now let's talk about and the workforce training that was under Mark Tucker. Is, again, not academic, it is workforce skills, computerized. Let's talk about the impact of Every Child Succeeds Act here. There's a lot going around. I see you've got some information there in your seats, and we can figure out what's real and what's not real. I will say this. I watch C-SPAN with all this going on. I also read the blasted bill, 1,061 pages and counting. It is so bad, but I read every page of it, and I can tell you what's in there because I quoted some of what's in there. Now, I have a question for you. Why is it that Arne Duncan, President Obama, all the members of Congress who are trying to tell us what we should know about how this bill works, why is it that they have their children in expensive private academies instead of in these public schools under Every Child Succeeds Act? Why are they not there? Here's the first claim, and a lot of our GOP voted for this. Here's the first claim, that ESSA would get rid of No Child Left Behind. Well, they say that's why they did it. They should have waited until January. There was no big deal. They were already 2 years behind, 3 years behind, however. I mean, since 2007, they didn't reauthorize it. So they've been going all these years that they hadn't reauthorized it. They could have waited a few more months. What's the big jump on it? Or better still, just defund the thing. Just get rid of it. Just say we're going to sunset it. They didn't do that. Why? It is totally unconstitutional. They have no right to be passing that bill. I don't care what they say. Now, let's say the next thing, the claim, defunded Common Core in the omnibus bill, so Common Core is gone. I've been getting these emails now for weeks, and people say, do we have Common Core? We have Common Core. And I saw it on your faces when you came in. It's like, is she going to tell us we have Common Core? Well, here's what happened. Common Core was never a mandate, unlike Lamar Alexander, who's from my home state of Tennessee. He lied in this article in the National Banner. He said, we defunded this mandate. There was never a mandate to defund, people. Here's another claim. ESSA is unequivocally ends the federal government's role in coercing the states into adopting and implementing Common Core. There will be no more race to the top. We got rid of it, and we got rid of the waivers. So what? That's an academic question. The states had already adopted Common Core. The ones who didn't adopt it, Texas, Alaska, we weren't going to anyhow. And guess what? Some of those ones who adopted it are trying to get out of it. So, you know, this is no big deal that they said we're not going to coerce the states. Nobody was going to do it anyhow. No more race to the top. There's no way they were going to do that again because the states weren't going to buy that. And the waivers, that wasn't going to fly anymore. So it's no big deal. The horse is already out of the barn. So what did ESSA give us? Now, in spite of what you're reading, it does keep the testing requirement. I see there it says we did not keep the testing requirement. We did. It says we did not have the high stakes testing requirement. What that's referring to is whether teachers are going to be, that they use the test to grade the teachers. Is the teacher going to be evaluated on it? The ESSA gave the states some flexibility in that. That's all it's referring to. Let me tell you, we do have the testing still with us. The other thing we still have is this dangerous requirement to rank schools. It is devastating. It is killing Texas. The rankings are going to be including the student performance scores and also graduation rates, a percentage of those graduating. The schools are still going to have to report some subgroups in English learner progress. Our state has to tell the feds how much we spend per child in each school. It's none of their business. Why are they asking us to give them that? See, again, it's this control. If they're trying to give us control back, why did they take that? Also, they're butting into state's business. They're forcing Texas to butt into lower performing schools instead of letting the principal work through it, the superintendent and the teachers work through it. Congress has no constitution. Now, I have the highlights over here. It's in fine print. I did that so you wouldn't have to have so many pages to take home. So I can even see it with my readers here. So if you could just pull it up, and it says Every Child Succeeds Act. We're just going to run through some very, very brief things, and so you can read it when you get home. Look at the second paragraph at the top. I heard Tim Ryan say this when I was watching C-SPAN this day. He's a Democrat from Ohio, and he says Common Core is being redefined as a social emotional learning, which must come first in the learning hierarchy. First before academic. I thought the schools were supposed to teach our children academics, to teach them learning. I didn't know we were supposed to be teaching them how to think, non-cognitive, affective, how to think, how to believe, whether or not they should believe about marriage. That's what this means, and they call this SEL. So when I told you Common Core, it has a new name. It is a new name. We don't call it Common Core anymore. So have we gotten rid of Common Core? We've gotten rid of the name. But now we have to call it Social Emotional Learning. So just get that one in your thinking. SEL, that is the new learning. And that is embedded in this ESSA. Go through there and read it. If you want to get bored, you can find it in there. Lots of pages on it. And then Paul Ryan expressed his utter delight that legislation is embedded in ESSA. And then down here, under the highlights of the bill, feds require states to adopt Common Core. Now, I took this from the language of the text. It requires states to demonstrate they have adopted the standards aligned to college and career standards. And yet we're being told that the feds were not telling us what to do with our standards. They just did. But they don't say it the way, And it's all about these nuances of language, but it's in there. So yes, they have told us what we have to do about standards. We have to adopt the social emotional learning standards, except we call it college and career standards. Now, they don't say what's college and career standards. However, if you just go onto their website, go into the Common Core website, you see over and over that next term, college and career readiness standards. That's what they keep referring to Common Core. I pulled it up yesterday, it's still on there. And I made a picture of it just in case they take it down after tonight. Now, you'll see, go on down there and you can see what the problems are. Let's go to the next one. Feds control the content and state standards. Now, they say here that we have to have the same standards shall apply to all public schools and public school students in the state and shall include the same knowledge, skills, and levels of achievement expected of all public schools in the state. Well, when you get through all that gobbledygook, what they've really told us, and if you keep going, requires challenging state standards, and they want that to be aligned with higher education. They're really controlling the content in our standards. They're controlling the content in the state standards, which controls the test. Why? Because when it controls the test, it's also controlling what the students are being taught. In a nutshell, our students are being taught to be ready, not for a 4-year university, but for a 2-year university. You'll see that down in the middle. And the experts who have looked over this over and over have said this, and they say there's no way that Common Core, social emotional learning prepares you for a 4-year university. Now look down the next one. Feds control state accountability system. They said, okay, we've gotten rid of this one-size-fits-all and we've gotten rid of this accountability. You know, we just shoved it somewhere else because they couldn't get it done this way, so we just go around the bend and we do something else. We shove it back down to the states now, except that we control the states about what they have to do. So this gives the U.S. DOE control over test content that includes the academic and psychosocial questions, and this ESSA bill says they want psychosocial questions on those tests. What is that doing? It's doing psychological mining on your child during a test or your grandchildren. They should not be doing anything psychological manipulation, doing any kind of test or any kind of survey or in any classroom. Now, if you go down to the next one, psychological profiling, there was a House Bill 2103. You also have a handout about that. It is called Nosy Data Mining. And if you'll read through that, that will give you information. Please check out very carefully that in every state, in all 50 states, there is a statewide longitudinal database. And we were given free money in 2010. I went back and looked up the grants in Texas. Free money to set this longitudinal database up. Why? Because the feds couldn't do the data mining. They couldn't get that data mining themselves. So they forced the states to get it. And that's where we are with it. The states are having to collect it. Look on the next page. Testing is still required. And if you think it's not still required, according to this handout that I saw in your seats, it says in there that if the states don't have 95% participation, there will be penalties for that. And they say the state will figure that one out. But already there have been letters in December that went out to states saying, don't even think that you're going to opt out of this test because we're going to punish you and take money away, especially Title I money. Now, they didn't sunset the law, they should have. Now, Common Core for tots, I saw also that it says they kept pre-K intact. They did not, they expanded it. What do we mean by this? If you look here very carefully and read this, now I have a lot of information that I have put together, and I have used it at the last Texas legislative session. Some people said they chose not to even bother to look at that. It's just facts, including even the government. I found the government research that says Head Start has been a bummer. It's never had anything positive. And so now, instead of the feds controlling K through 12, they now are controlling pre-K through 12. Now we have let's get down to the federal school choice. I think I've talked about that already. So you can see a couple of things that I have talked about of federal charters there. And just know that we're talking about it from the federal level, not from some of the great ones that we have here, like our Great Hearts and there's one called Life Schools. Is down Highway 12. And it's taught just like a private academy. And Christine is working in one, and hers is without all the stuff in there. I know what she's teaching, and she's doing a fabulous job. I mean, it's like a private Christian academy, what they're doing there, and hers is a charter school. It's the Hillsdale Charter School, by the way. Then two more things, and then we're through here. This 21st century learning. This is very dangerous, and by the way, this is not something new. This has been out under the radar for 5 or 6 years now, and they have them right here in Texas, right here, I think in the Dallas area I found some. And this is to get kids to stay in the public setting, the school setting, for much longer hours each day and for many more days out of the year. And then they're going to do more and more with the children and, dealing the parents out. And then there's a family engagement program. This is really, really a big problem. When I went onto the TEA website yesterday, I found this in here. I was just pulling up, just going around, just generally doing my nosy, sleuthing work. And I found this word, draft of high-quality pre-kindergarten family engagement strategies. I said, that's the same word used down here. Well, so I wrote it down here for you, what it's all about. So when I went through here, it says they're going to make goal-oriented home visits. Well, down here, when I went to the government website, it says for sure that under ESSA, that they can definitely make home visits, that you are going to be a partner with the government in the rearing of your child. Did you hear that, what I said? I didn't say the government's going to be a partner. It said you will be a partner with the government. This puts you kind of in the back seat. And it says further that the agencies will come out and will make home visits, and that they will be working with social emotional learning. And it goes on and on talking about that. Now they're talking of this document from TEA. This is about pre-K children. But where does it stop? Anytime the government has its nose in anything, it never stops. It'll be a little more and a little more. It'll be any socioeconomic. It'll be any age. The government intends to take over. Okay, I've hammered that one enough. You see that I get really worked up over this. Let's go back and let's say, okay, what can we do to stop this? Well, in my mind, the best thing we do is just tell the government to butt out and say, why are we having standardized testing? Why do we have state accountability programs? Because the big deal is, until we get rid of progressive learning, we are not going to have any changes whatsoever. Here's an action plan. Let's stop the madness and let's focus on classical learning. Let's teach our children instead of training them like lab rats. Let's end this annual testing and let's go back to the way it was. And I cannot tell you how old I am. I can't tell you when I talk because I'd have to lie to you. But we didn't have all these high testing. We would test, 6 weeks and a semester at the end of the year. But the kids weren't all stressed out over this. They weren't slitting their arms and pulling their eyelashes out and crying and refusing to go to school. It was just a normal way of figuring out where the children were. Let's go back to the way education used to be. Let's end this current state accountability system. The one we have is not working. Let's stop the TEA. By the way, the TEA, I heard when I was listening to one of their sessions, I know I heard this right, even though I'm hard of hearing. They say they fully intend to implement ESSA. Why? It's not even constitutional. Why should they have to implement this law? Especially the things that I've been telling you about this. Now, and one of the easiest things that I think we can probably do is to stop this data mining. Now, when I say easy, keep in mind that when we try to do something like school choice or stop this testing, we have the big boys who really want all this accountability, the big boy money, and then we have the government. But we have a lot of Democrat parents, we have a lot of teachers, we have Democrats in the House and in the Senate here who don't want this. So I think we can get some traction here, but the data mining absolutely has to stop. And I would make this suggestion. Senator Haynes is absolutely our flag bearer for education. He is so on target for doing anything for education. And I don't know if you know that he and his wife homeschooled their 5 children in Highland Park. beautifully educated young people. So this is our person, our go-to person. So, but he needs our help. He can't do it by himself. He's up against it. So what we want to do is to help him. I promised that I would write articles and I would push the message out. I would try to get newsletters out, even if I have to sit up late at night and do it. But please help me, help him. Show up over in Austin, get the message out, hold meetings or whatever, but let's get it going. I couldn't read some of this. Here's one. In order to be accredited, do the private schools have to comply to ESSA? Well, it depends. No, the answer is no there. It depends on how it's written. The private schools they have another accreditation. They're not coming under the same thing. And if you will go online and you will pull down the Texas Constitution, you will see in there what it says that the private schools have to do. And they don't have all of these standards. They don't have to go through the same things that the public schools do. The students don't have to go through all of the STAR testing and everything else. And by the way, they don't have to be accredited. A private school does not have to be accredited. And its teachers don't have to be accredited. However, and by the way, Hillsdale is not accredited. It says we don't need accreditation because we know what we are. We have our own reputation, and we don't want anybody telling us what to do. No strings to pull. So, in Texas, though, if you want to be a private school, you want to be accredited, then your teachers have to be certified. So the answer there is no. I think, let me read this, I'm not sure if I understand it. A major concern is TEA contract with the American Institutes for Research. Their mission statement is to conduct behavioral and social science research through adaptive testing. Isn't that what I said? ESSA has in their CAT, computer adaptive testing. The next generation of assessments meeting will be in Austin next week, and they will be discussing this in accordance to ESSA mandates. How do we protect our state and local schools from this? This is a real problem, and this is what I was telling you that I heard them saying. And they didn't. What I was listening to had to do with SEL, that they wanted SEL to be put into our TEKS. And I know that they will want to go along with this adaptive testing. The way we're going to have to stop it is to go over there and start being a pain. Our politicians are not listening to us. What was it that one of you said to me the other day? I'm not being listened to by politicians. I'm going to go the next route. I was writing an article yesterday for National Center for Policy Analysis, and I was talking about the parents. A few years ago, the governors and the school boards and the superintendents thought they were going to push these parents around. Now today, the parents are saying, we're almost in control now, and the school boards and the governors, you are going to make some changes. We are not letting our kids take this test. We don't care what. So they just simply aren't letting them take the test. Here's what I recommend that you do, and I'm going on record with this. I recommend you opt your kids out of test. Do not let them take computerized tests. Do not let them take the surveys, especially computerized tests. That's where it's so dangerous. This is where they're doing this